RFK Racing representatives were spotted in IMSA paddock on Wednesday and Thursday last week at Sebring, and Stewart-Haas Racing is still expected to leave Ford at the end of 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. First, going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Perez's 2024 Sendero Provision scheme that we'll see this week in COTA. I think his paint scheme looks really good in my opinion. It's got some really solid coloring, got really good looking text and colors. I think it looks really good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2024 Castrol 125 anniversary scheme that we'll see this week in COTA. Looks great in my opinion. Love the colors on it. I love its anniversary scheme. Looks like a throwback scheme for sure. Excited to see it out on the racetrack. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jimmie Johnson's 2024 Advent Health scheme that we'll see in 3 races in 2024. Jimmie Johnson obviously running a ton of races this year. I think this looks actually really good, and I also like the coloring a bit. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Danny Kvyat's 2024 Go Track scheme that we'll see this weekend at COTA. This scheme's alright in my opinion. It's not absolutely fantastic, but I'm glad to see that Danny Kvyat is back behind the wheel in Xfinity. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Leland Honeyman Jr.'s 2024 Gamblers Austin scheme that we'll see this weekend at COTA. Decent colors, in my opinion. Do like the green on it, but other than that, not a fantastic scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Marco Andretti's 2024 Group 1001 scheme that we'll see at COTA. This is obviously Marco Andretti's first start in the Truck Series this year of Cook Racing Technologies and Roper Racing. I think this looks alright in my opinion, but we've seen this truck before, so really not amazing, but we've seen this truck many times before. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2024 first paint scheme that we're going to see in both Talladega races. Solid in my opinion, actually better than last year's scheme because the one's actually integrated quite a bit more. I think it looks great. I think it does look fantastic, and I'm looking forward to see it out on the racetrack this week, not this weekend, in a couple weeks at Talladega. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Elliott's 2024 Dale Jr. throwback to his National Guard scheme from 2014 that we're going to see at Darlington. Kendra Motorsports teased us. We all thought that Dale Jr. was coming back, but in all honesty and all seriousness, I think this is an absolutely amazing and incredible throwback. A lot of success. I think did an amazing job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack. I just love it. I think this is definitely one of my favorite throwbacks I've seen since they brought the throwback race back or started doing it about 10 years ago. I think this is definitely the best Chase Elliott one we've seen up to this point. I think it looks phenomenal and looks absolutely incredible. I think it's a fantastic and great looking paint scheme, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carter Fartouche. As it was announced on Monday that Carter Fartouche will be driving the 22 for the Raymond brothers this weekend at Circuit Americas. For those who do not know Carter Fartouche has been with the Skip Barber Racing and currently races in the Michelin Pilot Challenge as well. So he does have quite a bit of road course experience. While I don't expect him to set the world on fire this weekend with the equipment he's in, I certainly do think he could have a decent performance. We'll see what happens and how he ends up performing and see if he can do a good job this week in COTA with the Raymond brothers. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Overstock. As it was announced yesterday morning that Overstock is going to sponsor Josh Berry this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. Overstock, for those who don't know, is a company that Marcus Lemonis is part of now, and I believe they also own Bed Bath & Beyond. And they kind of teased this and revealed this like a day early on accident. Like they were doing some sort of contest, and unfortunately they kind of revealed the scheme a little bit early. I think it does look really good, don't get me wrong. I just feel like if you're going to tease a paint scheme, don't release it early. Nonetheless, so I think it's really cool to see that Overstock is going to be coming into play, a new sponsor in the sport. Maybe in the future we can get a Bed Bath & Beyond scheme, but I'm glad to see that Josh Berry has a new sponsor, considering Josh Berry was struggling for sponsorship going into this year. Glad to see he does have a sponsor for this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Vicente Salas. As it was announced on Monday morning that Vicente Salas will make his Truck Series debut this weekend at Circuit of the Americas, driving to 20 for Young's Motorsports. For those who don't know Vicente Salas is an up-and-coming racer and also currently competes in the E-Racing Coke Pro Series. And he's had some success in that series, I think winning if I'm not mistaken. Now he gets to live out his dream of racing in NASCAR. I think he's got a decent chance and opportunity here. I know that Young's Motorsports is going to be bringing in a truck that might struggle a little bit, but I think it's a great and fantastic opportunity for Vincente. And I do believe he's going to have a really decent chance and opportunity to be pretty quick this weekend at Circuit Americas if he can run good. We'll see how he ends up doing, and we'll see how he ends up performing. I'm excited to see him have the chance and opportunity, and hopefully he can have a great run in his debut this weekend at COTA. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Circuit of the Americas once again, as the restart zone has been revealed for this weekend, and it's actually going to be a little bit farther back than it's been previously. Remember, last year's restart zone, if you guys can see on the screen, was actually getting really close to the straightaway and basically almost to the start-finish line. But because of the fact that everyone was basically running into each other and they are not doing single-file restarts for whatever reason, which I think, especially for Circuit Americas, they should be doing single-file restarts for this race. They are going to be moving the restart zone a little bit back so people can get spread out a little bit more. They're hoping that there's not a lot of wrecking that takes place on the racetrack. That's the hope with the move they're making. I think this is a good decision to move it a little bit farther back. Hopefully it does end up getting spread out, and hopefully people don't run into each other like Joey Logano did last year at the Indianapolis Road Course. I still think this is a really good decision, by the way, for them to go ahead and move the restart zone back, because I think they need to do that in case we do have a lot of wrecks and incidents that take place this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaz Grala. As it was announced yesterday that Kaz Grala is going to drive the 28 car for RSS Racing this weekend at Circuit Americas, confirming that Kaz Grala is going to be doing double duty. Because remember, Kaz Grala is not only going to be competing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at RSS Racing, he's also going to be driving a 15 car for Rickwer Racing this weekend. Kaz Grala is definitely going to be a long shot for sure, and the 28 cars had some decent speed this year, but it hasn't been absolutely amazing. Now, a lot of people are wondering what's going on with Kyle Sieg. Kyle Sieg is expected to be back behind the wheel of the car next week at Richmond. It's just that he's taking a week off because from what I understand, he's not the biggest fan of road course racing, so that's the reason Kaz Grala is getting behind the wheel. I do think that Kaz Grala, though, will have a very good and a really solid performance with this team. RSS Racing's had some good speed on road courses in the past, and remember, the 28 car did win, or the 28 or 29 car, which is an RSS car, yes, prepared by SHR, it did win, so I'm just saying, maybe Kaz Grala could be a sleeper pick to win this weekend. Nonetheless, so a great opportunity for him, and hopefully he can make the best out of it this weekend at Circuit of the Americas in both races. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about R.C. Anderson. As it was announced yesterday that R.C. Anderson is going to drive the 14 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. For those who don't know R.C. Anderson is driven in the Indianapolis 500 multiple different times and is trying to find a way to get Able Motorsports back to run the Indy 500 this year. They're having a little bit of trouble, getting the funding and sponsorship ready to go for that. But R.C. Anderson also has made a previous Cup start as well, back I think in 2021, I think at the Indy Road Course or Watkins Glen, driving for Rickwer Racing at either the 15 car or the 51 car. I think R.C. Anderson does have a little bit of talent. I think he's someone that could be one to watch for to maybe have a decent performance, but let's be honest, SS Greenlight Racing has not been the fastest organization in the past. So they've had a couple top 20 performances with J.J. Yeley this year, so certainly the cars are definitely capable of running up front. We'll see how R.C. Anderson ends up doing this weekend. I think it's a great opportunity for him, and I think he will be a very solid contender and threat, potentially get a top 20 this weekend at COTA because the field is really stacked going into weekends. So nonetheless, great opportunity for him, and glad to see that R.C. Anderson will be in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about BJ McLeod. As it was announced yesterday or Monday that BJ McLeod is going to run part-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for the rest of 2024. And according to reports, the plan is for them to potentially, if they get the funding and sponsorship enough, they're hoping to run full-time once again in the in the Xfinity Series full-time in 2025. This means that the owner's points that they had, which they were 22nd owner's points going into this weekend, they have given the owner's points to Danny Kvyat and the 07 organization, basically guaranteeing that the 07 car is going to be able to make the show at Circuit of the Americas, despite probably going to be struggling a little bit in qualifying. It's a shame to see the BJ McLeod's team will not be running full-time the rest of the season because, like I said, we've seen some pretty good pace and some pretty good speed out of the BJ McLeod Motorsports group because they got a lot of money from the sale from Live Fast Motorsports because of $40 million charter that they sold. A lot of that money, from my understanding, did go a little bit into their Xfinity Series program. And I think they've shown a lot more speed this year. And yet, I do think they'll probably run all the super speedway races throughout the rest of the year and probably some of the other big races. They'll probably run the Xfinity Series race at Indianapolis for sure and probably some of the other playoff races throughout the season. It is a shame to see if they're only going to be running part-time the rest of the season, but it's not a massive surprise or a shock to see that is happening. So, wishing them the best of luck the rest of the year. It's a shame they're not running full-time the rest of the year, but to be honest, I'm not really surprised or shocked about this, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Change the Game. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that Change the Game is going to sponsor Hailie Deegan this weekend at Circuit Americas, confirming that Hailie Deegan has another sponsor. Change the Game, for those who don't know, is a new album that is coming out with Cody Jinks and was also announced that Cody Jinks is going to be the Grand Marshal for the Focus Health 250 on Saturday afternoon. It's really cool to see that she is going to be promoting Cody Jinks' new album. I've listened to a lot of Cody Jinks' music. I think his music is absolutely really, really good. But it's really good to see that she does have a new sponsor for this weekend. The paint scheme absolutely looks really phenomenal too. So I'm hoping the best for Hailie Deegan this weekend because she needs to start having some good performances and she's kind of on the bubble going into this weekend. She's like 30 or 31st in the points, so she cannot afford to have a bad qualifying performance because there are two cars that are going to be going home, and if she doesn't do that great, she could fail to qualify. Though I don't think she's going to fail to qualify, but because I do think she has a chance of maybe a top 15 or even outside chance at a top 10, though the Xfinity Series field is absolutely stacked this weekend. I really hope she can make the best out of it this weekend, but again, I think it's really good to see that she does have a new sponsor for this weekend at Circuit Americas. I really hope she can make the best out of it this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the MLB. Now, Chris Myers mentioned this on the pre-race show with Fox before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place at Bristol Motor Speedway, but he mentioned this on the pre-race show that there might be an MLB game that could be happening at Bristol Motor Speedway. Adam Stern also reported on this as well. He says that Bristol could be the future site of an MLB game. And according to the rumor mill from some of the reports that come out, it sounds like it could be the Atlanta Braves versus the Texas Rangers. Basically, Atlanta Braves are kind of close to Bristol, Tennessee, and also Texas is a little bit closer to that as well. And they're two of the most historic teams in MLB history. And the Texas Rangers are just coming off of also winning the 2023 World Series as well and be looking to go back-to-back in the World Series this year. You think about how cool it is to see. And Bristol has hosted a lot of big games before. They've hosted a couple NFL games back, I believe, in the 1960s. They hosted a college football game back in 2016. They had Dale Jr. Marty Smith involved with that, though Marty Smith's been part of ESPN's college program for many, many years. I think Alan Bestwick might have been involved with that as well. I think it is really cool to see that the MLB is getting involved with Bristol Motor Speedway, but it is basically a really amazing dome. We see Mr. Beast get involved and actually host one of his hide and seeks at that track as well. So I love the fact that they're talking about this. I think it will be very successful if they can get an event going there. I'd love to see an MLB game there, and I wonder if it'll happen this year because it may end up happening this year. That certainly is a possibility in the shout. Nonetheless, I love this, and again, I think it's phenomenal and great to see that the MLB might be hosting a game at Bristol Motor Speedway. I hope it is very successful, and hopefully it can bring a lot of success to the racetrack in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about dirt racing. Now, multiple dirt drivers that are competing in the NASCAR Cup Series this year basically were asked questions about dirt racing if it does belong on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Because remember, for the last 3 years, they have been racing at Bristol for the spring race, but it was a dirt race that took place on Easter weekend. That's when they kind of done it for the last few years. And the dirt drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series were asked questions about this. Kyle Larson said no to that. He basically blatantly said no. He's kind of had the same sentiment for the last couple of years where he's not a big fan of dirt racing for the Cup Series racing there. I think he enjoyed it a couple years ago, but basically says no, he doesn't want Cup cars on a dirt track. Alex Bowman echoed those comments and also saying no as well. He's not a big fan of the Cup Series racing on a dirt track as well. Meanwhile, there's a little bit of contrary belief between Chase Briscoe and Christopher Bell, where they say they'd be okay with there being a dirt race at a track, but they say don't have it at Bristol Motor Speedway. Have it at Eldora Speedway, which I entirely agree. Look, I believe that NASCAR should be racing in dirt? I absolutely think they should be, but only on one time. I don't think you should flood the schedule with like 3 or 4 dirt races. I personally think that there should be only one dirt race on the schedule because while, yes, NASCAR does right now currently have the most diverse schedule in probably America today and probably in the world at this point, I personally do believe that NASCAR needs to have a dirt race on the schedule to make it even a little more diverse and it tests the driver's skill. And I think there should be a little focus put on that as well. I do agree that we should not be racing it on Bristol. That's my opinion for sure. But I do think we should be having it at a different type of track. I think personally the only track that would work at is Eldora Speedway. I also throw the track out of Wheatland. That certainly could be an option that they use as well. And maybe Knoxville again, but Knoxville, not a lot of people really showed up to the track when the Truck Series raced there. And also the racing just was not that good in Knoxville in the few years we've ran there. And the 2021 truck race especially was one of the worst disasters in Truck Series history. So yes, I'm definitely for having a dirt race on the schedule, and I think it only should be one, like I said, and I think it, like I said, should be a one-off, and I think it should take place at Eldora Speedway. Some of you might disagree, and that's your opinion, and that's fine, but to me, I personally think that there should at least be one dirt race that takes place on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, and also for the trucks, and I even think the Xfinity Series should have a dirt race as well. I'd love to see that because I think it would be good for racing especially. Hopefully that ends up taking place where we do see a dirt race in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. As it was announced on Monday that Connor Zilisch will be running full-time in the ARCA East Series in 2024, driving the number 28 car for Pinnacle Racing Group. It's also confirmed that he's going to drive 4 ARCA races in 2024 in the 28 car, including at Watkins Glen where he nearly won last year, and is also going to be running some late model races and some cars tour races as well, a couple as a matter of fact. Connor Zilisch has had a very, very busy last couple weeks. Remember, it was announced a few weeks ago that he was going to be driving an 88 car for Junior Motorsports for 4 races, or 3 or 4 races, including at Watkins Glen, at Kansas, and also I think Homestead was on his schedule as well, and I think the season finale of Phoenix. Then it was announced about a week ago, last Friday, that he'll be driving a 7 truck for Spire Motorsports this weekend, and at COTA, and also will be driving a couple other races later this season at Homestead, I think another track, I think it may be Kansas if I'm not mistaken, and also, it also just came off of winning the Sebring 12 Hours in the LMP2 class. Connor Zilisch, there's a lot of hype around this kid, because I think he's absolutely one of the most talented up-and-coming prospects that we have currently in NASCAR today and in the racing world in general. And I think he's a driver who could go on to win a NASCAR Cup Series championship. And I absolutely think, well, yes, I think William Swalch is definitely going to be the favorite in ARCA East this year. I think Connor Zilisch is going to give a run for his money this year. I think it's going to be a really close championship, and I think that Connor Zilisch is going to be the only driver, in my opinion, that really can keep up with William Swalch. Because while I do believe that William Swalch is a very, very talented and a great race car driver, I think that personally, if you want my opinion, I do think that Connor Zilisch is great too. So I think it's going to be a really tight battle for the championship in ARCA East this year. But I think it's a great opportunity for Connor. I think he absolutely will make the best out of it, and nonetheless glad to see that he'll be running full-time in the ARCA East Series in 2024 and also getting some other starts this year as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Bristol TV ratings. Now, we were wondering how the Bristol TV ratings were going to be because the ratings this year for NASCAR have been in a really good state so far. According to Adam Stern, Fox got 3.809 million viewers for Sunday's Food City 500 at Bristol. That is up 10% or 11% from 2023. And the peak viewership from what Fox reported was 4.5 million viewers. I think 4.57 million viewers. Also, it actually ended up beating out the Players game, which is one of the biggest sporting events that happens. And he also doesn't even know that NASCAR was going up against the NCAA March Madness show, and probably a lot of those fans that were Chase Elliott fans came back as well. Don't think the Chase Elliott effect all had a role in the ratings being up. NASCAR's been up every single week. Outside of the Daytona 500, we have averaged about a 10 to 11% increase of every single race this year on the TV ratings. And we were up nearly, I think, 500,000 viewers from last year. I think last year's race had 3.3 or 3.4 million, and it was nearly at 4 million viewers. In short track races, historically for NASCAR, for whatever reason, they don't always do absolutely great. So to see that nearly 4 million people average tuned into the race, because again, I think it would have been up a little more had the NCAA March Madness selection show, I should say. I don't think we would have seen the ratings as low, but they're still really, really good. And I think NASCAR is really headed toward a great direction. It's not up like 20%, and I think the sport's heading in a good place. Now the question will be, how will COTA go? Because COTA is a road course, right? I think that's a big key thing. The other reason why I think the ratings are up so far this year, though, is you look at the racing. The racing product here this year has been phenomenal. Outside of Phoenix, I think every single race we've had in Cup has been a banger. I think if you have good racing, you're going to have more people that are going to show up, and you're going to have more people that are absolutely going to tune in. So nonetheless, I thought it was a fantastic race overall, and I really, really loved it, and I absolutely enjoyed it. And I think it's really great and awesome to see that the Bristol TV ratings were up for this weekend, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about WeatherTech. As it was announced yesterday, that WeatherTech is going to sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen in both his NASCAR Cup Series season debut in the number 16 car for Colleague Racing, and also will sponsor him in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Circuit Americas in the number 97 car for Colleague Racing. This scheme looks really, really great in my opinion. Obviously, WeatherTech has had a pretty big commitment with SVG for this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but it is really cool to see that WeatherTech is going to be sponsoring Shane Van Gisbergen this weekend at COTA. Obviously, this is going to be his season debut of the 8 races that he is planning to run. And from my understanding, and we know this for a fact from some of the photos that did surface that kind of got leaked when a scheme got leaked the night before, basically, this car is being prepared by Trackhouse Racing. So I do expect that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be a major threat and contender to get it done. Yes, I know Colleague Racing has struggled in the Xfinity Series at times at road courses, but we know their road course program can also be really, really strong. And you think about Shane Van Gisbergen, the success he's already had this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and he's going to the Cup car, the next-gen car, where he does have a lot of familiarity. I know he did say, speaking to Kevin Harvick, that he struggled in the simulator, but I do expect that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be very, very fast this weekend at COTA. And I think he's one of the odds-on favorites. I know some are going to be picking him as an underdog pick to win, but I think he's one of the favorites going into the weekend because, like I've already mentioned, we know Trackhouse has had a lot of success here. They won here 2 years ago with Ross Chastain, which was their first win in the NASCAR Xfinity Cup Series, I should say. So I do believe that we are going to see them be very, very quick, all the Trackhouse cars especially, but I also do expect that we are going to see Shane Van Gisbergen be a threat to get it done. We are going to have reactions this weekend on how he qualifies and how his races go throughout the weekend as well. You'll see that here on the channel. But I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be a serious threat and contender to get it done in these races. Looking forward to see how he performs. I think he will be a big threat and contender to get it done this weekend at COTA, not just in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, but I also do believe in the NASCAR Cup Series race as well. I think he's going to be a major threat and contender to get it done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Bristol tire reactions from over the weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. So if you watch the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway, the biggest thing that was talked about was tire wear. These tires were being cheesed up and being gone through like cheese graters. And basically the tires would only last for about 40 to 50 laps. The biggest reason was because rubber was not being laid down, and they used a new resin compound out on the racetrack at Bristol Motor Speedway. That's why they were having a really difficult time with the tires. And also, a lot of drivers had reactions that are part of the Cup Series. First, Brad Keselowski absolutely enjoyed it. He felt like he put it back in the driver's hands, and he felt like it made the drivers a lot more disciplined as well. Denny Hamlin also loved it. He said it put it back in the driver's hands, but he also had more of a thought on his podcast, Actions Detrimental. What he said is that because of the temperature being as cool as it was, being 65 degrees and it not being 70 degrees ambient temperature, rubber was not being laid down. Because if I'm not mistaken, when we raced here in September, because this was the same tire they used in the September race at Bristol Motor Speedway, rubber was not being laid down this time around, unlike last time where rubber was actually being laid down. But Denny Hamlin loved it, and he said, don't blame Goodyear for this, and maybe blame the resin just a little bit. Chase Elliott also echoed Denny Hamlin and Brad Keselowski's comments, and he said he absolutely loved and enjoyed it, and also put it back in the driver's hands. And he also had other drivers like Chase Briscoe who enjoyed it. Ryan Preece tweeted the day after saying, I'd rather have a race where we don't have a bunch of aero BS and basically have a race where it's put back in the driver's hands. Most drivers like Justin Haley also enjoyed it. Now, there were some drivers that did not love it. At first, Kyle Larson said he did not enjoy it and wasn't a fan of the tires wearing out as much. But yesterday when he was interviewed, he had a couple days to think about his thoughts, and he said, I should elaborate more on my thoughts on the tires, and I do have a lot more favorite thoughts. I thought the race is fantastic. I just wish the rubber was laid down. Ryan Blaney after the race was not very happy. He was getting also asked questions about Ross Chastain. He did not enjoy. He didn't want to basically not run as hard as he could and didn't want to lay it down. In general, from the consensus, you have very positive to some mixed and negative reactions. I think Alex Bowman also had some comments on the tire situation as well, saying that he enjoys tire wear, but he wishes that rubber would have been laid down so the tires didn't wear as much as they did. Again, I go back to the Denny Hamlin comments. Denny Hamlin said that the tires were not laying rubber down. And that, for me, is my only gripe on this race, because I thought this race on Sunday was one of the best races I have ever watched. 54 lead changes, which is a record for Bristol Motor Speedway, but also is a record for a short track, I believe. I think that's the most lead changes since 1981 at Michigan, which I think Steven Summer, Daniel McFadden had reported on Twitter. And you look at the racing itself, it provided a really entertaining and amazing and fun product. But again, the tires wore because these drivers did not learn how to manage these tires as much. And I would love for see Goodyear to push the envelope a lot more. The problem is that Goodyear didn't even expect this. Because like I said, and I mentioned this, they basically used the same tires that they used last September. So that's a little bit something that might be a little concerning. But I think a lot of it has to do with rubber not being laid down. If rubber had been laid down and there weren't a bunch of marbles on the racetrack, I think it would have been able to create a much better racing product to where, not a better race song, I think the racing product is great, but I think it'd be able to create a little bit of a longer tire run. But I think if they can adjust suspensions and other things, and I think NASCAR is going to have some tire tests later this year at Bristol. I think they're probably going to add a test here to make sure these tires don't wear as quickly, because I don't think they had issues when they tested earlier in the year when they did the wet weather tire test, which that's another thing to remember, is the reason they didn't put PJ1 down and put a resin compound down is because they have wet weather tires now. So it's definitely been very interesting for sure. I think the drivers had some very interesting reactions, some positive, some negative for sure, but I think for the most part, most fans enjoyed it. The Jeff Gluck poll should have been a lot higher than it was, by the way, but that is just my honest opinion. I absolutely enjoyed and loved this race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories of today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, we've talked about RFK Racing a little bit on this channel over the course of the last couple months because there's been a lot of talk about potential expansion, not just on their NASCAR Cup Series team, but also potentially in IMSA. And over the weekend, Bozy, and shout out to Bozy Tatarevic for reporting on this as well, it was reported over the weekend from Racer.com's Marshall Pruitt that multiple members from RFK and representatives from the team were spotted in the IMSA paddock on Wednesday and Thursday last week at Sebring International Raceway right before the Sebring 12 hours. And I think Brad Keselowski also commented this on as well before the Racer.com article came out that he had been interested in going back to IMSA. You talked about a couple months ago, they had a lot of interest in wanting to potentially bring Roush back to IMSA. Now, obviously, Roush has an experience racing in IMSA as well. They had a lot of success, and they actually have won the overall race in the Rolex 24 in the past, and even in their classes as well. I think Mark Marr has a win in that. I think Calvin Fish won with this team. Brian Till, I think, has won with this organization. Wally Dallenbach Jr. drove for this team and had quite a bit of success. And in general, RFK Racing is looking to go into GT. Why? Well, obviously the next-gen car, a lot of it resembles a GT3 car, which you see in Le Mans 24 Hours. And we've talked about this as well, but you look at a lot of these teams and organizations that are expanding and going into different forms of racing. We've seen Hendrick Motorsports expand. They've had a little bit of presence in IMSA, in the GTP, or basically the LMDH classes a couple years ago in that 48 Action Express Cadillac they used to run. And also they ran the Garage 56 entry that ran at Le Mans. I think a lot of the teams saw the success of Garage 56, and they're wanting to get a lot of success and grow over there. And I think the fact that you're starting to see more interest, and it's not just them, you've got a lot of teams in other forms that are interested in expanding into different products. I mean, we've seen Team Penske go into IMSA and win overall in GTP in the Rolex 24. But we're not just talking about in IMSA. I think there's also some talk about RFK potentially expanding in their Cup Series program. Obviously, Brad Keselowski has mentioned this as well, that the big focus is for them to eventually expand to 3 full-time entries in the NASCAR Cup Series, which includes the Sage 60 car. And I think that they are looking to expand into that as well. So where could they expand and how could they expand? Well, obviously, if they're going to run a third full-time entry in the NASCAR Cup Series, they are going to need a charter to get that done. And we know right now, and Brad Keselowski even mentioned this, but we know right now that one, the charter agreement has to be finalized for a team can even think about potentially expanding. But two, you have to get those charters. And we know right now that charters are worth $40 to even $50 million at the moment. So charters are absolutely a lot more expensive than they used to be even a few years ago. Because back in 2018, 2019, you get a charter for $2 million. And it's not just RFK that's looking to expand. We know 2311 Racing has had some conversations over the course of the last couple of years, and we talked about on the channel earlier this week, that they're looking to expand in the future. Maybe they could in next year if the charters become available. They want to expand to 3 full-time cars. We know maybe Spire Motorsports wants to expand again. We know Front Row maybe wants to expand. Trackhouse, we know for sure wants to expand to potentially 4 full-time entries. But you think about possibilities of drivers who get behind the wheel of a third full-time RFK car, or even their IMSA program if they go over there. Like a Haley Deegan, get her a little bit of experience. Get maybe Mike Rockefeller to drive for the program. Maybe get some other drivers into Ford camp, like a Joey Logano perhaps. Maybe get some other drivers that are coming up in the Ford group, like a Frankie Muniz. That certainly could be a possibility and a shout. I look at RFK Racing, and I think of Brad Keselowski and what he's been able to accomplish over there and bringing their program back up in the last couple of years. And I certainly think now the goal is to expand. I think they want to expand to 4 full-time entries a Cup. He stated that a few years ago. And there were rumors even back earlier this year before the Sage Dixie car got announced. There were rumors, and we know that Cam Waters has mentioned as well as a possibility of making starts in Cup this year, though that has not been confirmed at this point. There were rumors that they were looking to go to Xfinity this year, but obviously that did not end up happening, and I think the main focus is either going to IMSA or expanding to 3 full-time entries in the Cup Series. Nonetheless, I think it's very interesting for sure that they are talking about this, and I do believe there's a really good chance and possibility that they could go ahead and expand in the not-so-distant future. So we'll see what happens in regards to that and see if they do eventually end up expanding, because I do believe that RFK Racing in the not-so-distant future, they are going to expand to IMSA, or maybe they're going to expand their Cup Series program. But it'll be something to watch for as we progress throughout this season and see if anything comes with it and see if they do go to IMSA. The fact they were spotted in the IMSA paddock tells me that they are looking to expand in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, we have talked about Stewart-Haas Racing quite a bit on this channel over the course of the last couple months. And obviously one of the reasons we've talked about Stewart-Haas Racing is because of rumblings and rumors. What are the big rumors? Well, a lot of people have begun to speculate that Stewart-Haas Racing may end up leaving Ford, including Jordan Bianchi a few weeks ago, has stated that it sounds like Stewart-Haas Racing may be leaving Ford at the end of this year and going to a different manufacturer at the start of 2025. Now, why is this potentially going to happen? Well, this is currently the last year of the contract that Stewart-Haas Racing has with Ford. They've had a contract with Ford since 2017. Now, you look at how Stewart-Haas Racing has performed to start off this year. They have had a much better start in 2024 than the last couple of years. They've shown a lot of improvement. Noah Grayson's had a solid season, even though he is 25th and 26th in the points, and they've had some good performances. But I think that Tony Stewart has been very, very frustrating. You think about some of the rumors as well that have been going around. Some people think that Gene Haas is not involved as much, and even Tony Stewart hasn't been involved as much, though we have seen Tony Stewart at the racetrack a little bit more. And you look at SHR over the course of the last couple of years. Like I mentioned, they've had a little more success this year, getting some top 10s and even some top 15s. But all their drivers are still kind of near the bottom half of the standings, if I'm not mistaken. So they are still, in certain instances, struggling a little bit. Now, obviously, you think about SHR. They started off in Chevrolet. They had a lot of success over at Chevy back when they started their program. They won 2 championships over there. They have not won a championship since getting over to Ford. And they lost Kurt Busch. They lost Eric Almirola, Kevin Harvick. And they've lost opportunities on other drivers as well, Clint Bowyer as well. They've lost opportunities to get drivers. They had an opportunity to pick up Kyle Larson. That did not end up happening. They had an opportunity to pick up Kyle Busch when Kyle Busch was no longer going to be with JGR in 2023. That, of course, did not end up happening. They had an opportunity to pick up Zane Smith. His name got mentioned quite a bit. He went to Spire/Trackhouse under contract with Trackhouse Racing. They went over to, basically, they could have picked up Michael McDowell. They could have even picked up a driver like Matt DiBenedetto or Haley Deegan. That could have been a possibility. But obviously, that did not end up happening, unfortunately, for those guys. And you think about SHR. Obviously, now we speculate where they could go. Well, there's only the 2 other manufacturers, but there is a third other possibility as well. They could go back to Chevrolet. They had a lot of success with Chevy, like I mentioned. Both of their championships were won with Chevrolet. But they haven't been Chevy for 8 years. And my worry is if they do go back to Chevrolet, they may not get into the key partner status, because right now there are 3 key partner teams in Chevy. You've got, obviously, Hendrick gets at the top, and then you've got Trackhouse and RCR. Would Stewart-Haas Racing go in that top paddock? That could certainly be a possibility for sure. And I think that SHR would have more success than they're having now with Chevrolet, because Ford, outside of maybe Noah Gragson, a little bit of Ryan Blaney, they have struggled a little bit to start the season overall as a manufacturer, because they haven't won a race since they won, basically, I think the last time they won, I think was back at Vegas maybe, or something like that, or Martinsville, excuse me, it was the last time they won last year, and they haven't won a lot of races, especially as of late. I think if they go to Chevrolet, I think they would be very, very successful. But you don't just have Chevrolet, you do have Toyota. And I had heard that they were talking maybe to Toyota a couple weeks ago, but I haven't heard anything different about that, because I don't know if that exactly is going to happen, because Toyota right now has 3 key partner teams that are all equal. Legacy, 2311 Racing, with Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, and even maybe Kurt Busch in the future, even Carl Edwards in the future. Probably not going to happen, no. And then you got Joe Gibbs Racing over there as well. They've got 3 key partner teams. If Stewart-Haas Racing was to go over to Toyota, I don't think that they would be successful, because I think they'd be in the lower tier. They wouldn't go up to one of the top teams, because I don't think Toyota would store up for 4 key partner teams. And obviously the reason people talk about this is because also Front Row is basically gotten key partner status as well. Now, another really crazy outside possibility that could end up happening is maybe Stewart-Haas Racing stays with Ford for another year in 2025 and waits for Honda to come in. Honda has been heavily rumored to be coming in over the course of the last few months and the last couple of years. And we had heard talks about a month ago that Honda was getting very, very close to potentially joining. Marshall Pruitt had reported from Racer.com, had reported that they were in serious talks and conversations on coming in. And we know that Honda is in, there's a chance that they may end up leaving IndyCar at the end of the 2026. It may go focus on Formula One, but also may go focus on NASCAR as well in joining. And I think the reason they're looking to join is because of growth. Though some people don't want them in now because some people believe that Honda might be holding off the possibility of the horsepower being increased in the sport. I don't entirely agree with that. You think about Stewart-Haas Racing knowing what decision they're going to do, right? Because I think it's really tough on their end. I think they do want to be a very competitive team in this sport. They want to get back to the top because SHR, like I mentioned, they have struggled. But they also have been very, very frustrated with not getting the fair shake, in my opinion. They feel like that they haven't been getting the fair stuff, and obviously, like I mentioned, front row coming in and basically becoming a third team at this point, becoming the third team, and now with SHR becoming the fourth team, I think they're only going to get worse. I don't know if they're going to continue having a sustainable speed, because again, they've had good speed to start this year. There's no denying that. But they also struggled at points this year as well. They've had some good qualifying performances, and like I said, Noah Gragson has been off to a solid and a pretty good start in 2024. But again, you look at SHR and some of the struggles they've had in recent years, and I do believe that is going to be a major key reason why they do end up leaving Ford at the end of this season. I think I do believe that they are going to be going over to either Chevrolet or Honda. But again, there is an outside possibility they do stay with Ford for another year, sign a 1-year extension, and they become the key Honda team. I don't think they'll be the only team we're looking at. With Honda comes in, you got Trackhouse. And then you think about the other thing to look at as well. If they leave Ford and go to Chevy, they could lose a charter as well, because they right now have to have 4 cars, and they're required to have 4 charter cars. So they could sell one of their charters, get a ton of money because of the sponsorship woes they've had, and they could sell it to a team like Junior Motorsports perhaps if they wanted to jump, or 2311 Racing if they want to expand, because we know they're trying to expand. I think you look at SHR, and I do believe that they are going to leave Ford at the end of this season. It's going to be something very interesting to watch and see if they do, in fact, end up leaving at the end of this year. But in my honest opinion, like I've already mentioned and said here in the video, I do believe that Stewart-Haas Racing is going to leave the Fords and go to Chevy potentially in 2025. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, and if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Link in the description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Stewart-Haas Racing is going to stay with Ford or leave? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about RFK potentially expanding in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, I have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for the race at COTA. Tomorrow, I have the NASCAR Cup Series race picks for COTA. And I also will have the paint scheme preview as well. Then on Friday, I should have another NASCAR news video dropping. I might also have some SVG videos dropping this week as well. Got a ton of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.